G'day and welcome back to my channel. Now as you can see, the Bounty's got quite a lot more rigging done on it. I've worked my way through here and I've got the mainsail here for the foremast, and I've also got the spritsail, and I've got all the rigging done for that. And what I'm going to do in this video is we'll continue on from the last video where we were working on the little sails and we had attached all the rigging lines, blocks and pulleys, and so they are ready to put up, and that does make it a lot easier when you try to hoist them to the mast and attach. And that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to hoist and attach that topsail to the foremast, and I'll show you how all these rigging lines go in, and it really is not as scary and it's not as difficult as it looks. You just work through it line to line. Alright, let's get on with it. Roll the music. Now, one of the things about rigging that really frustrates people the most is they get it in the wrong order, and there is a very important order in the way of doing things. As a general rule, I work from the stern to the bow, I work from the inside to the outside, and I work from the bottom to the top. Now, in doing that, the first thing that you would rig is the standing rigging. Okay, so these sort of lines here, which are stays, and they go forward, so forward stays if you like, okay? They get put in first, and I would start at the mizzenmast, I would rig the mizzen stay, I'll rig the main stays, okay, and away I'll go. So I'll rig all the stays up on the mizzenmast, I'll rig all the stays that go back to the mainmast, and then I'll rig all the forestays. And that way I keep the tension. Those stays are probably the only ones you really want to get a bit tight, because they're going to hold everything in place. Then I would do the ratlines. I would do the shrouds, which will hold the masts and stop them from going basically port or starboard, okay? Those forward stays are locking the masts so they don't fall forward or they fall aft, okay? But the shrouds here, they will keep the mast fixed so they don't fall over. Once they're on, you can then put your ratlines across. So yeah, the ratlines are the horizontal bits. I know everyone calls that whole thing the ratlines, but it's really just those horizontal pieces are the ratlines. So they go on, and then I will put the backstays, these ones. Okay, there's backstays here and backstays here, and they help hold things in place. Now, if you didn't do that, if you put your ratlines on first, and then you try and rig in your mainstays, you try and do that, it can be done, but it's a bit tricky because you'll be fighting with them in the way while you're trying to get in there. So the order is forward stays, ratlines, shrouds and ratlines, and then your backstays, and that's your fixed rigging. Okay, it's mainly all the black ropes, the tarred ropes that sit still. Okay, so once they're all locked in, they're also the innermost lines. Then you can work on the outermost lines, which are generally the running rigging. Now with the running rigging, again, I'll work from the stern to the bow. The reason being is running rigging tends to run backwards, it runs to the stern. So if I was to put, say, these lines in first, these running rigging lines in, when I go to do the mizzenmast, I've got lines all in my way. It's making it a lot harder for me to really rig. If I just rig the lines for the mizzenmast by themselves, they all start at the mizzenmast and they go back. They really don't go forward. Everything to do with those sails goes backwards. So then once that's out the way, I can move to my mainmast, and everything I rig there will go backwards. Moving now from the mainmast to the foremast, there's a big space here. Well, there is the fixed rigging, okay, but it's not really in our way because we're working around it and outside of it. Even our stays and our ratlines, we're doing lines outside of it, okay? So if you look this way, these lines are all outside of that. And in fact, everything that we do, all the running rigging that we'll do now, is outside of the fixed rigging. And the beauty is, if we're moving forward, each time we move forward, we're basically just working in a free space, and then we're moving forward, working another free space. So I've moved forward all the way through there, and each time I'm working in a very clear space. It's very easy for me to see what I'm doing and get things done. And this is the issue that a lot of people get into, is they'll start putting running rigging in first because that looks easy, you know, and then they try and put the ratlines in, or they try and put the stays in, and they're getting all tangled up because they're trying to put things inside of things. It's too hard. So work from the inside out, and as I said, I preferably work from the stern to the bow, and certainly work from the bottom the top, because if you try and put those top lines in first, you will just tangle up, because the little triangles they form will be basically a lot squatter, and as it goes up they become more acute. So they will sit one on top of each other like a set of cups. So the triangles here of lines running down and coming out to belay points will be inside the triangles here coming down of lines. Okay, this will all become apparent now as we rig the topsail here for the foremast, and you'll see that everything I've done before is pretty well out of our way. We don't have to worry about it too much. We can just get on with the rigging and things are fairly clear and easy. So let's do it. So the first thing we do is I'm going to just click this into place. Now luckily on the Revell kit I've already got, not even sure you can see it there, but I've already got a little attachment point there which they provide, which is on the little yoke, and I have my little contact adhesive on there. If you've seen the previous videos, and I would recommend, this is the first one you're watching, go back and watch my previous videos. I explain a lot of things. One of those is using this little special little contact adhesive, modelling contact adhesive that allows you to actually join things and pull them off, and join them and pull them off, which proves really useful when you're doing things like this. So let's see if we can actually find the point. Working blind here. Voila. So easy as that, because I've got that contact adhesive there and I've got a little nub to work on. So that's given me my connection point. And now I can get in there and I can start pulling those lines. These are the truss lines here, right? I can pull those lines around the mast there to tie it on. So I've got a little puller. Shown that in previous videos. So like this little line here I want to get through, and I want to be able to basically, I want to tie inside there. So this is where it sort of gets a bit tricky. You've just got to watch lines and watch what you're doing. This is one of the cases where you're doing some running rigging and it kind of is inside, and it's a little annoying, but this is out the way really quickly, so you don't worry too much about that. So I should be able to use my little pulley tool, grab that line and pull. Yeah. Got most of it, and now I can for some reason, there we go, it got a bit caught there on a Halliard. So that one's through there. This one I think is okay. Okay, so hopefully I'll probably get my fat fingers in the way, but I'm just going to tie that in place now so that I can then attach the sling. In reality I think it would have been done the other way around, but for what I'm doing with a model kit, this is the better way to do it. All I've done is made a very simple loop. Okay, I should use a pointy tweezers, they're easier. Pointy tweezers are always much easier. And I'll just check that I haven't tangled with any other lines. No, I haven't. Now to pull these, because I am banging all these other lines, right? So now to pull these, I need this line back where it was originally. So this is a fiddly one, so don't be too worried. It does get easier. So there's that part there. Just pull you out of the way. And this one I can probably pull like that. So there we go. That's it. And if you haven't been too rough, and it's always when you're doing this, check that you haven't tangled with any other lines. No, I haven't. So at this point I'll now put a little dab of white glue in there. Trick is to find a spot where you can get through. Okay, little dab of white glue, and now I can give that a bit of a firmer pull. And don't worry about that white glue slopping. Okay, so we let that tack. We won't completely tie this off hard yet because we've got the sling to do. Now the sling, I've already run one line. I mean, strictly speaking, the sling would only be a single line with a couple of pulleys on it, but see how big my fingers are compared to this? In this scale model, there's just no way it's going to happen. It's a lot easier just to run 2 lines and tie them off. And it's cheating, but honestly, it's still, I've got a sling, so it's slightly accurate. It actually is functional. I don't know what's going on out there. People are banging, and I don't care. So sorry about that, just put up with it. So running through, the sling's going to come up here through this mast head, and then it goes over the top of where the masts join. And that's how it's going to be. Okay, so it started here, and then it goes up either side of the mast head that I built in previous videos. That's a little scratch piece I built. You can watch one of the other videos, you can see how I built that. And then it will tie off on the top there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a loop and tie that off. But I think we're getting there. Yep, and that just drops down to that little position there. That's it. And pull it forward. And there we go. That is tied off. Now it doesn't have to be super tight. In fact, you don't want to pull it off the yoke, because remember you've got your truss over here on the yoke. None of your rigging needs to be super tight. If it is, you're going to have a problem. You'll pull something out. It needs to be firm and taut, but never pull it really tight. So we'll just action that with a little bit of white glue, and that will stop it going much further. Slopping it in generously. Lovely part about all this is it all dries clear, so we'll just get rid of the excess like so, and that will all dry clear and disappear. So that is the sling tied in. So the sling is now stopping our yard from falling down. Not our yard arm, I kept calling it yard arm before, sorry. We're in the middle of an apocalypse, I mean, you know, goodness me. So that sling is suspending the yard. The truss over here is making sure it doesn't bang back and forth. It's holding it to the mast, and it also will allow for the tacking. So those two major locating rigging lines are done, and they're some of the hardest because you're inside all of that, and it's really tricky, especially as you're getting up the mast. And it was actually probably easier to rig below the other sail because it wasn't as tight. But yeah, the other things I'm going to show you are nice and easy to see. So we'll move on now, and we will do the sheets and the clue lines and the lifts. The next thing I'll do, not strictly in the order that you would probably do a Revell ship, but in the model, what I want to do now is get a bit of a curve in my sail, and these sails were all permeated with white wood glue, so they're actually shapeable. So now that we've got it locked up the top here with our sling and our truss, what I need to do is tie off the sheet here. Now, strictly speaking, a sheet line is only one line, and we have two on here. So I'm going to adjust that to be a little more accurate. I've got these nifty little new nippers. In my last video, Bernard saw that I was using my crusty old they were actually sprue cutters that I was using. They were fairly sharp, although when I tried to use them in the video they were blunt, and they were also big and fat and get in the way. And he went, "Barry, come on, I've got these leftover PE cutters that I don't use, and they might be perfect." And actually they are, because I found I can put them in and just rest them where I need to cut, and they do a wonderful job of trimming the lines without buggering everything up. So what I need to do here with my sheet is I need to tie it off, and the sheet is the line that is pulled down so that you get a full sail out. You know, like when they say 3 sheets to the wind, well, that's what they mean. They mean pull on those sheets, pull the sheet lines, so we get lots and lots of sail. So I'll just need a little bit of a looseness because I want to have a shape to my sail. I want to have a bit of a curve. I know it's kind of ridiculous that I have wind in my sails and yet I have no crew on my ship, but it's a model. I mean, you know, so that will help hold things in place as well, stop everything flapping around. So I'll just put a dollop of glue on that. So a bit of white glue just to basically stop that running off the end. And so there's no tension. Sheet lines usually are quite loose. once the sail is sort of pulled down and in place. Well, that's probably not good advice. Sheet lines aren't super taut, but they certainly allow for billowing. Let's leave it at that. So there you go, that's the sheet line there. Looks quite good. I'll do the one on the other side. But one other thing I can do now is, as these glue points here dry, I can start snipping off my excess loose bits of line, because they'll all get in the way and they'll get me confused. So as I go, it only takes, usually I've probably got the next thing glued in place and ready to set, and I can go back and do the previous thing and trim off, and I sort of work that way. So I'm always trimming off the previous lines, setting the new lines. Now the next line that we're going to put is the lift, and I've already put one in here on the starboard side. We're about to do the port. Now there's the same down here, there's a lift, and there's lifts everywhere, and the lifts are, as I said before, for levelling the yard. So this lift appears to start up here. It's tied off behind the pulley. It comes down to this block here, this pulley block, back up again and through the pulley this time, and then it comes down all the way through down by the mast, and then it comes out at the bottom here, and this part, this big long line that the lift comes down the mast, we refer to as the Halliard. Okay, but essentially it's all the same line. This line started here on the top of the lift, gone through a series of pulleys, and it's come all the way down here, and it finishes on a cleat at this point. Sometimes you have a belay point, you have pins, but because the all the belay pins are forward here, that's how it is, that's how my research showed. The actual kit has a whole series of belay points, which you could leave in, which does make it easy to tie. But I had to put in a little eyelet there to simulate the cleat. I mean, doing cleats at this scale would be virtually impossible. So I put a little eyelet in there, a little brass eyelet, and I've already tied off one set of lines, which would have been the lifts for the sail here. The mainsail on the foremast. This is the top sail of the foremast, and I'm also going to run that line down to the same cleat, because that will be the point where it's secured and adjusted from. Okay, so what we've got to do is, on this side, we're going to have to run this line. Now, you think you start at the top and work to the bottom. Well, you can, a lot of people do, but I actually find it's easier to start at the bottom. There's a tiny little loop down there, and that is where the rope ends, and basically they loop it off and they tie it off, and there's a little bit extra there so they can let it out and they can bring it in. Okay, so there's always a loop, and it's nice to have those loops on there. I'll show you how to make a loop in a sec. Should be a figure eight, but I'm just making O-shaped loops because they're easier at this scale. Anyhow, it's tied off here, so it's easy to make the loop first and then run your line up the mast all the way up, okay, until it reaches the pulley, which isn't there at the moment. We've got to make one. I've got a little pulley here that we're going to put on, so there's a pulley block there. It'll then come from that pulley block into this pulley block here, which is a double one for reasons I'll explain later, and then we'll go back up again and tie off, and then I will get exactly the same as I have on this side. So I'll have this pulley arrangement. Now, I haven't actually tied that one off tight yet. It's still a little bit loose, because there's nothing worse than tensioning that, getting it too tight, and you've pushed your yard up and it's all out of skew, and then you go to do it on the other side, and if you try and straighten it up, you're going to bend your yard into a U shape. And as I said, running rigging doesn't need to be super tight. It needs to be taut, but not super tight. So I'll leave that loose until we actually run the other side and we have the other lift in place, and then I'll basically just get enough tightness, or get them both taut enough so that they look good and they make sure they don't pull the yard out of square. Now we're ready to make our Halliard, which is going to run all the way up the mast, the foremast, and then become the port side lift. Okay, so I've cut some length of my cotton and I have run that through my wax block so that it is defluffified. Okay, now the length I needed I worked out just by simply holding the cotton against the model and basically going that way, it's got to go that way, and it's got, worked it out, and then added a bit for the loop that I'm going to need at the bottom, and then also a little bit just for luck. And I came up with 40 centimeters. Okay, it's quite long, and that's just to do this particular halyard. I need 40 centimeters. I've made longer ones. Some of the other, especially on the main mast, they were much longer. So the first thing we had to do is create the loop. We won't need all these tools. I have discussed these tools before in other videos, but just quickly, in case you haven't watched those, we are going to need some white glue. I'm using Sally's Aquid here. White PVA wood glue works really well. Okay, so I've got some of that prepared and off camera. I'm going to use a little file, little diamond file, only because it gives me the diameter I want of about 3mm to 4mm to make my loops. Okay, these are the loops that are at the end of the rope at the belay point. Basically where they tie it off, there's a little bit extra that they loop up. And I found this was about the right diameter. So you could use anything. You could use a paintbrush, an old stick, put it on your finger if you like, if it's thin enough. Those are my little nippers. I explained about those before. They're handy all the way through this. My curved tweezers are invaluable all the time if we're doing rigging. The puller, yes, we love to do a bit of pulling on this channel, and that will be fine. And I've got a super duper little needle here. It's called a big eye bedding needle, and I've shown this in other videos. It's not pointy. Well, you can sort of stab yourself a bit with it. It's essentially blunt, but it has a whopping big eye. I'll show that in a sec. We'll need that. But to start off with, I've got to make the loop, because remember, I'm working backwards. I'm going to create my halyard loop at the belay point, tie that off, and then go up the mast, because I'm in Australia and everything's upside down. So what I do first is I'll just put a little bit of the white wood glue on the tip of my diamond file, and then taking the preferred end, it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to just put that on there, hold in place, and start wrapping it round if it'll cooperate. There we go. Once you've got a couple of wraps, it holds in place. So what we'll do now is I'll just add a little bit of white glue on the outside. You need to move fairly quickly because you don't really want this to glue to the diamond file, because then you're going to have a huge problem trying to get the bloody thing off. So while that is still wet, I will tease it up with my nail, tease it up and push it up, encouraging it to come off in one loop. At least that's the aim. There we go. We have a nice little loop, which is exactly what we want. Now, try not to disturb that as much as possible, because I have got sticky stuff all over my fingers. To make sure that doesn't unravel, I'm now going to use my big eye needle, which I'm going to need for the rest of this anyway. And these guys are good. First you've got to get them open, and it's often easier to split them open with something else, such as your diamond file. There we go. So that is now open. Thread goes through a nice big hole and press to the end, and now it's ready for threading. And what we'll do is we will go through that hole in the loop, being very careful with it not to unravel it. There we go, that's all holding together very nicely now. It's such a fiddly little thing, isn't it? And I've got sticky fingers. Oh look, it's just, this is typical modelling for me, fumbling hands, fiddly fingers. Okay, I have a tiny loop. I have the tiniest loop in creation, and that's what I want. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to look at least like the sailor made an effort trying to roll up a loop. And that little bit extra there, you don't need that. They tend to look untidy. So, usually they've done a good job of looping. Okay, so there we go. That is now ready to go on our model. Now before I can tie my Halliard, I've got to get the other block up here, the little block for the top of the lift. So I just got to tie that in there. So I shouldn't need the needle for this. I've only really got to put it behind here. Said he with absolute confidence. So I've threaded this through and knotted it off, just a simple knot. And once that's done, just watching where I can pull the line without tangling the rest of the rigging. It's a bit fiddly, I know, but you get there. So once I've got that in place, just with a light loop, I'll dab on a bit of white glue to hold it there, and then I'll try and get it to the correct position. Double loop it to really lock it in place. You've got to allow, it can't be super tight because that has to bend down 45 degrees. And so there we go, I'm bending it down, making sure it's correct. Okay, now we can start at the bottom with our Halliard. The first thing I do is run that line through, the one we have the little loop on. I'm running it through that little eyelet down there, being careful not to tangle with anything else. Things get in the way the whole time. And then I tie a knot again, just as I did to hold the loops in place. So I tie that off against the little eyelet down there, and make sure that's positioned correctly. And now I'll run that big eye needle all the way up through the fighting platform. And that big eye needle makes it so much easier to get these lines and run them through and get them taut. Now once that's up to the top, I can then hold that top pulley, the one we just put in, run the needle through the hole in the pulley, in the block, and there we go, our Halliard is run. Now we'll run the line down to the pulley block on the end of the yard, and it's becoming our lift. I run the line now through the front hole on that pulley block, the one on the front of the sail, and I do that because I need to leave the back hole free so we can run the clue lines later. Now that's up the mast through that top pulley, it threads between those little shroud lines there. It's a pest, but it does. It's annoying on this one. Down to this double block here, and through it goes, and then it comes up underneath and it ties off at the back of that pulley block, like so. So that and that are that's your two lifts, port and starboard. So I'll go off camera now and I'll tie those off because I basically want to make sure I get everything level. It's a bit hard to do when you're shooting it, but that's basically the principle. It's really, you just got to have your wits about you and slowly take the line up and through the mast, and using the big eye needle makes a heck of a difference, because as you can see, I would push it through and then I would collect it with the tweezers, and away I went, checking as I went I wasn't tangling. If you do tangle, you can push it back through the same spot and untangle, and you just take your time and away you go. And when you do the blocks, you hold the blocks with your tweezers and then you push your needle through the block. It's easy as that. With the right tools and a bit of patience, rigging is not that difficult. Well, if you've made it this far into the video, well done. Yes, there's been a lot to absorb. I know there's a lot of waffling, but look, the rigging's kind of complex and there's lots of things I want to show you. And if anything, the one thing I'd like you to get out of this is 90% preparation and 10% application. Really, with these lines, most of it's preparing for them. And it's that preparation that then makes it fairly easy. Because as you can see, it's only been the last few minutes of the video, I've actually run a line. And that's because it required setting those pulleys, getting everything organised, making sure everything was prepared and tied and ready, and then running the line is actually the easiest part. At least I hope that's how it comes across. Alright, well, I've still got a lot more to do and we've run out of time in this video. So come back next time if you're not brain dead and bored. I hope not. I hope you're enjoying this. Let me know. If it's boring as batshit, let me know. I'll stop making these videos. I'll just go and have a bloody vacation. But I hope you're actually enjoying these and there's something there that I can pass on to you. Because we've still got clue lines and we've got braces and we've got all kinds of things to add. That's for the next video. Alright, that's it for now. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.